Well, friends, spooky season is here. Only a couple weeks until Halloween. That was one of my favorite holidays when I was teaching. We always had a big Halloween parade at our school, and parents would come and stand in the parking lot, and the whole school would put on a parade for them in our costumes. The kids always looked so cute, and it was a lot of fun. So today's episode is how you can have some spooky fun in your classroom without losing the academic time. So stay tuned. Let's get started. If you're lucky enough to be at a school where you can celebrate Halloween, you know that it can be kind of a blessing and a curse. Having the kids and teachers dress up in costumes and having a party was always fun and a much needed reprieve from all the work. But you also know that the day of the Halloween party was pretty much of a bust. There wasn't a whole lot of learning going on because the kids were either hyped up on sugar from trick-or-treating the night before or too excited about the party to learn much. As much as I loved Halloween, I didn't really want to let the whole day go to waste, and I didn't want to deal with crazy kids all day either. So I decided I needed to figure out a way to keep the kids busy learning and yet still having fun. So I decided we'd visit a haunted house. No, not a real haunted house in the literal sense, but rather a haunted house in our classroom. This turned out to be so fun that my whole team joined in, and we did it every year. It really was a blast. So, to set the stage, the day before our Halloween party, right before the kids went home, I'd read the story At the Old Haunted House by Helen Ketterman. It's a cute rhyming book about a haunted house, not really too spooky, but it was cute because it sort of showed the kids things you might see in a haunted house, stuff like ghosts and pumpkins and witches. And after we'd read it, I'd ask the kids if they'd ever been to a haunted house before. Some of them had gone to haunted hayrides and stuff like that, so we'd make a list of things that you might see in a haunted house. And then after the kids left, I'd set my room all up. Some years we did this as an entire grade level, and other years I just did it in my room. I had 8 stations that were designated to be the rooms in the haunted house, and at each station, kids would play a math or literacy game. I'd hang spider webs in my doorway and hang yellow caution tape. I had a giant fuzzy spider that I hung from the ceiling, and I'd put spooky spider webs all over the room and other spooky stuff. I had some little skulls that every time you walked past, they'd light up and they'd go, woo! It wasn't scary or anything like that, just scary enough to make it fun for kids. Believe me, they loved it. So there were 8 stations, and they were all based on math and literacy skills. The first station was the spooky basement. At that station, the kids had to make a spooky sentence, and so there were little mixed up sentence cards, and they had to choose 3 cards for the beginning, middle, and end of the sentence and write and illustrate it. So they could make sentences that said stuff like, a spider will run in the forest. They could choose from all these different beginnings, like the spider or a bat or the monster. And then the middle was the action part. So like will run or can hide. And then the ending was where they were, like in the basement or in the attic. So all the sentences turned out different for each kid. At station 2, they visited the haunted library. And this was a write the room activity. They had to search all over the classroom for the monsters who'd gotten loose from the library. And on the back of each monster picture was a word. So they had to unscramble all the words and put them in order in a sentence. And then they had to figure out what the mystery message was. I think the mystery message said something like, Happy Halloween from the monster family. At station 3, they visited the haunted laboratory and made their own monster. I had trays of all different shapes from construction paper with little googly eyes and legs and feet and stuff, and they could choose whatever they wanted to create their own monster. And then at station 4, they visited the haunted kitchen. I found these sort of creepy cups at the Dollar Tree that looked like they had skeleton fingers all over the cups. So I wrote our sight words on pieces of paper, and I cut them out into individual letters. I put a different word in each cup, and then the kids had to figure out what the word was in each cup and write it on a sight word stew worksheet. At station 5, they visited the witch's lair, and it was a math station where the kids were graphing witch's brew. They each got a little baggie of treats with stuff that represented the different stuff that you'd find in witch's brew. There were little bugle chips for witch's fingernails, chocolate chips were the witch's warts, candy corn was supposed to be pumpkin teeth, mini marshmallows were ghost poop, so the kids had to sort and graph everything in their brew at that station. Station 6 was visiting the operating room where they had to put Mr. Bones back together. It was an addition game where they rolled the dice and then they added them together And then whichever number they got would tell them which piece of the Mr. Bones skeleton they could take to start putting him back together again. And then the first one to put the skeleton back together at the table was the winner. At Station 7, they visited the spooky attic where the monsters lived. And I had a bunch of little monster pictures in different sizes, and they each got a cup of candy corn, and they used it to measure the length of each monster, and they wrote it on their monster measurement paper. And then finally, the last station was a visit to the graveyard, and they played a little board game called Ghosts in the Graveyard that was a math game. When I tell you this was such a hit, we always had our Halloween party and the parade at the end of the day, and so visiting the haunted house stations in the morning was the perfect way to spend the day. The kids absolutely loved it, and I didn't have to feel guilty that it was a lost day of instruction. They got tons of math and literacy practice, and they were having so much fun they didn't even realize they were working. It was really fun the years that we did it as a whole team because we each set up a station in our 4 classrooms, and then we put the other 4 up in our hallway. We decorated our hallway to be all spooky, and I had a few parents come in to help out at the stations. It was seriously a blast. So if you're thinking that you're dreading the craziness of Halloween, or maybe you're looking forward to it, but you aren't sure exactly what to do on that day, setting up a haunted house is the way to go. If you want to try it with your class, I'll put the link to the resource in the show notes. It's got all the games, all the activities to do all of this with your class. Okay, friends, I hope your class doesn't get too hyped up on candy this year and that you have some good spooky fun. Until next time, remember to make learning feel like play, and I'll see you next week.